Rachel. I'm Rachel Fenichel. You may know me on GitHub as Rachel Fenichel. Pretty straightforward. I'm pretty active on there, so you've probably seen me. You've also probably seen me on the forum. If you ever post anything on the forum, ask questions, all of that, I'm there answering them. So I'm here to talk about new stuff that we've done in Blockly, and this is kind of covering covering the last year and a half, stuff that we have added that you may or may not know about. Eric has mentioned that not everyone updates Blockly on a regular basis, and what we find is that people don't know that we have solved their problem. And we do actually solve problems when we hear about them, and sometimes we'll then hear back from someone and they're like, you know, it's unusable, and we're like, we put that code in a year ago. So I'm up here to be like, we put that code in a year ago, and maybe you should update. I'm hoping that you'll find something in here that's going to be useful for you. Hoping that you find something that's exciting that you want to use. And if nothing else, I get to show off what we've been doing, and that's pretty sweet for me. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to cover some big stuff, and I'm going to cover some small stuff, okay? For the big stuff, we've got type variables, some pretty major performance improvements, and workspace comments. And then for the smaller stuff, we've got things like more configurable toolboxes, flyout layout labels, flyout buttons, and a whole bunch of developer hooks, as we were discussing before. So here we go. There's this wonderful AV setup because AV always goes great. So before I start listing off things that we've actually created, I want to talk a little bit about how we decide what we want to work on, how we decide what features we're going to add, what bugs we're going to fix. You may have noticed we're a small team. Again, right now, that would be me, Eric, Andrew for engineering on Blockly. Neil provides moral support, explanations of why code looks the way it does, and occasional bug fixes when things really, really bother him. But we don't count on him as being one of us, so it's three of us. You're going to hear this from me a lot. We really want help from you. So given that we're a small team, we have to take a couple things into consideration when we're deciding what to do. First, we have to know that the bug exists or that you want a feature. So we pay attention to things that get said on the forum. We pay attention to bugs, issues filed on GitHub, and that's how we know about things that other people want. Okay. We also, for bugs, we're looking at impact. So we're trying to figure out how many people does this break. And sometimes what we'll find is there's one where it is really bad for a single user, but that's not a use case for almost anyone in Blockly. Like if we break blocks with an output and a next connection. There is someone using that. I know because we broke it and they complained, but it's not the common use case, okay? So for things like that, we might instead suggest workarounds for the person. We might try to help, but we aren't necessarily going to change things in core Blockly. On the other hand, if it's a bug that basically everyone's going to hit, like, hey, you made the keyboard unusable, we're gonna find out about that pretty fast, and we're going to work to fix that really fast. For features, we're looking for really concrete use cases. So we like to know this is when someone might use this. This is the target audience. This is going to be for educational stuff, or this is getting used in our, you know, in our business app and all of that. Okay. And then testing. How are we going to test the implementation? And how will we know if it breaks in the future? Anything that we put into Blockly, we try to keep working. And so it's important to us to not add things that we can't know about. And that means that adding specific cases where it's like only a few people are going to use this and the code branches off on the side, we might never hear when it breaks, and that can be bad. I've added a few of those, such as like horizontal toolboxes, you know, in specific locations, and it sometimes works. So, and then finally, implementers. Is there someone who's going to implement it for us? Because that's excellent. So if we can find someone who's going to implement it, if we can find someone who is going to test it, find someone who has a big use case for it and they know that it'll get used a lot, these are all things where those are good signals to us to work on it. Obviously, that's not all of it. Obviously, we work on things that don't fit all of those criteria, but those are how we know that something is really urgent. Many of the features that I'm going to show off in this talk came from our collaboration with Scratch. So a lot of times they would be really good at specifying these are the use cases, or they say we have an army of teenagers who will test this and they will file bugs if you broke anything at all. And those bugs, teenager bugs are amazing. Bug reports that say things like, it should work and it doesn't. They're just glorious. So we did a lot of work with Scratch over the last couple of years, as mentioned, and where possible, we've put those features back into Blockly. We've also done some work with Microsoft, with MakeCode. And so for a lot of these features, you're going to see, I'll say, oh, this is actually because Scratch needed this, or this is because Scratch implemented this, or App Inventor, and so on. Okay, so that's the high level. How do we know what we even should be working on? So first thing is typed variables. We completely redid how Blockly refers to variables. If you have tried to upgrade Blockly and you were doing complicated things with variables, I'm a little bit sorry. I promise it's worth it. So the long-standing problem that we were trying to solve here is that using variables meant losing type information. So you could have all of your carefully typed blocks, and you could have these blocks that handle strings and these blocks that handle numbers, and no one was ever confused, but as soon as you tried to add variables, that all went out the window. And so we decided that we were going to make variables actually be able to carry type. They store that information. You can use that in the generators. They're really powerful. We did this in part because Scratch needs this, because they actually keep track of different types of variables, but we decided that we could make this really general, done properly. As part of that, we made it so you explicitly create and delete variables. So the old style of doing this, you had to, like variables, you just look at what variables exist on the workspace at any time, and that's your list of variables. And if you rename a variable, we're probably going to get it all right. Fix that. There actually is an explicit list. You can create them, you can delete them. As a developer, you can also create variables without telling your users about them and use those variables in your generators. So again, really powerful. Really backwards compatible, which was a lot of the work to do here, actually. So you can continue to use variables that have no type and that are just catch-alls. If your users don't need to know about variable type, great, go for it. If you're loading a workspace with old-style variables and they aren't explicitly stored in the XML, we will still load them, we'll still create them, we'll keep track of it, and the next time you save it, the XML will come out the way it should. And we have developer docs for this, which is like my favorite thing to be able to say. Like, I just love it when we have docs. We had a resident who worked on this project for 6 months, 3 months? About 6 months, yeah. And she wrote documentation for it, and it was wonderful. I wish she were here right now. I think she's actually about 2 buildings over, so that I could just say, like, this is the person who did this. So we have those docs. And my slides are up on the website for this, and I have links for everywhere where I say things like we have docs. There are links on there. There is some future work on this. Let's see. So in particular, as previously discussed with a couple of you, scope. Scope is hard. Scope varies by the language that you're generating. So we need to figure out what to do about that and figure out whether there is a general solution that we can make work. If not, we need to figure out what we can suggest to you. And there's also work with functions to update both the function UI to better represent variables and kind of just how you can say things like this is a type variable argument or parameter for the function. Yeah, if you're running into pain points for this, please tell us. We don't know what you don't tell us. So that's variables. That was like probably a year between the resident who worked on it and then the follow-up of like making sure that it all actually worked. So we shipped it over to Scratch, and the teenagers were like, oh my god, it's so broken, it's the worst thing I've ever seen, and then we fixed bugs. So it's out there, and we're excited about that. Next up on Workspace Comments. So we have top-level comments, and these are independent of blocks. So you can see over here, we've got comment attached to a block, and we've got a comment that is free-floating. Okay, this visually may not be a big deal, but it's something that we know that people use a lot. So for instance, this is another one that Scratch wanted, and MakeCode also wanted, and in fact, Krishma, from scratch, and Sam from MakeCode did a lot of work to make this happen. And we know that the use cases for these are often like a teacher will create a starter project, for instance, and they'll want to put a comment on there that says, this is what this chunk of code does. Or they want to tell someone, this is where you should get started working with this. So we've added that. Almost all of the rendering of them can be controlled with CSS. So it's a lot easier to change the look and feel of these comments than it has been in the past. The fact that they look good is in large part, again, due to Scratch and Microsoft. You should see the colors I pick when I am allowed to make choices. Again, the bit about needing a designer, it's not me. It's definitely not me. All right. Let's see. Do I have any? I have a note at the bottom of this that says Workspace comments are still slightly in progress. So we have them in the code base in Blockly. It's on master. We did not turn on the option in the right-click menu to create them because they are not entirely stable. On the other hand, if you want to start using them and tell us what's unstable about them, that would be lovely. Let's see, how am I on time? All right. Performance improvements. This was a lot of work by Caitlin. Our friendly Picklesaurus over there. You may have seen her on GitHub. So this was over a couple years, honestly. We did a lot of work to make it faster to drag blocks, faster to drag workspaces, and faster to load new workspaces. And these are loading big workspaces especially was driven by App Inventor and by Scratch because, again, people would be like, I made this project. This project has 5,000 blocks, and it really bothers me that it doesn't load fast. And we're like, well, did you need 5,000 blocks? And they're like, that's not the point. Apparently, we don't get to ask that. So, especially, again, teenagers. Did you need 5,000 blocks? Yes, every single one of those blocks was important, and my project could not work without them, and no, I could not have used functions. Also, no loops. It just has to be this way. Okay? So we did a lot of work, or there was some work there on making loading workspaces faster, and in particular, Evan did some work on event filtering to make that go better. We had an algorithm in there on our events for what you run when you load stuff, and it said, this is n squared, but n is small. In the comments. N was not small. Evan swung by and said n is not small, and then updated it to actually run in log n or something. Linear time now? Yeah, it's much better. Life is better now. Dragging. Dragging was an interesting one. A lot of this work is a big cross-platform question. So there was a lot of like, what if I change SVG? What if I change our SVGs to be this way? And then, oh, hey, Safari is sad if I do that. And I'm fine, except that if I drag a block half an inch to the left of where it is, I lose the mouse cursor and it never comes back. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Or, okay, everything works except Internet Explorer 11 just said, no, that's not a function. So lots of work there. What we have fundamentally takes all of the blocks that you have and puts them on a single SVG when you start dragging the workspace. So instead of translating every single block separately and re-rendering all of those, we can take advantage of your browser doing a good job on this. This also means that as your browser improves, we improve. So those performance improvements have been particularly important for making mobile usable. So previously you'd start to drag on mobile and you'd like lose your blocks like halfway across the world. Much better now. Let's see. And dynamic categories in the toolbox. This is one of those smaller ones, but it's one that people just kept asking for, and we did. We swear we do listen to your feedback, even if it takes years. We did add this in. So there's an API here where you can add a custom tag to your XML in your toolbox, and then you can register a callback, and we'll call that function whenever we open that category. You provide dynamically whatever blocks you want in there, and we'll load them up. So This is already what we do for the variable and function categories. So you've probably already seen this. Now you can do it too. Really nice if you're working in a larger application that is likely to be changing things from the outside and you want to be able to pull those changes in and show them in Blockly. Again, docs. We have docs. It's the best. Along with that, we added a couple features in the flyout. So we added buttons, we added labels. Small things, but we know that these are things that people have probably been missing. So it's easier now to, you could always group your blocks. Now you can actually group and label them. And again, it's CSS stylable, so you can do whatever you want. That button up there where it says a button, that's what it looks like when I do visual stuff. Neil came by and did a visual refresh on it, and it was great. He added a shadow to it. I was like, this is not the solution that I wanted. So you can do whatever you want with that. It doesn't have to look like that, but this is just the basic implementation. Okay. Labels, basically the same thing. And the API for this is very straightforward. You put something in your XML, you give us a callback, we call that function whenever the button gets clicked. Developer docs exist. See, a couple other, I think this is my catch-all for developer hooks that we've added. JSON block definitions. So it's now you can define your blocks in JSON, and Andrew will be talking a lot more about that later. Field registration API. It's been possible for a long time to create your own field, but you always had to go change block svg.js just to make it possible to create that field. And it seemed like a shame that we would have to, someone would have to recompile all of Blockly because they wanted to add a single field. So this is a pretty straightforward API there as well. You register, you say this is my field's name, and this is what the constructor is for it, and we will handle things properly from there. That's actually due to work done by Jolly Toad, I believe. That's you? All right. See, this is...
Jolly Toad is across the pond.
Okay, thank you. Also, if you are on GitHub, it would be great if you can put your username on your badge. There are plenty of people here who I probably know, but only based on usernames. Okay, so yeah, the field registration API, solving a real problem there, pretty straightforward, and we're looking to do more things like that. Block hats. So in Scratch, if you have a block that starts off that has no previous connection, it'll have a hat. This is a nice way to visually show that you have, this is a start block, and Blockly just didn't have that. We have a flag now, you can turn that on globally. We've considered making it a thing that you can do on a per block basis, and we just don't know whether that's what people need. So again, talk to us. Let's see, local build script. Is anyone here based in China? No, okay. So this is a real problem that people have that they periodically tell us about, and we're like, we can't fix the firewall, is that the build script hits a Google server, and you just can't build in China. And the way to build then is to pull down the local Clojure library and build, and this has been possible, but we added a script to make it fast and easy, and not only is it fast and easy, when things go wrong, it mostly tells you what you need to fix. Along with that, we have a demo for doing advanced compilation to make it easier for people to get set up where they can squish down all of Clojure and get rid of most of it. Squish down the parts of Blockly that they don't need, such as fields that they're not using. Neil wrote that up. And let's see, context menu configuration. You can now change workspace context menu options. This matches what you could already do for block context menus. Hopefully it's useful for some of you. And I have links for all of these in the speaker notes for documentation or for the pull request or for where the script is located. You should check them out. You may have heard me say this a few times already. So we have the documentation for many of these new things that we've added, but we've also been adding things to our developer sites more generally. We publish JS doc every time we upgrade, every time we release a new release of Blockly, we require JS doc now in our code, so you have all of those in the reference section. And we've also been writing guides, getting started guides. We have code labs, stuff like that. This is something where we also appreciate help. Even if you just put out an issue on GitHub and say, it would be great if you add this phrasing to the documentation, we can take that and we can run with it. Last but not least, testing and releasing. You may have noticed that we have an announce list now. That's pretty new. People said that they didn't want to be subscribed fully to our Blockly developer list because they were getting too many messages. I consider that a success. If we have enough of you talking to each other on the developer list that people are complaining that they get too many messages a day, I'm happy. So we added announce. It's very low traffic. It's almost exclusively our new releases. And we release basically every 2 months. So we're going through, we do a bug bash, and we do a release, and we put out useful things like release notes so you know what changed. I know that these are all things that are pretty basic. On the other hand, it's not something that we had or necessarily needed when we didn't have as many people using Blockly. Now that we have it, we're hoping that it's useful to you. If there are things that would be more useful to know about, you should tell us. And we have continuous integration. We run tests all the time. This gives us more impetus to actually add more tests since they might actually catch things now. It also makes it a lot easier for developers who are contributing code to know immediately whether their code is going to cause a problem and be able to do that with a much shorter feedback loop. Okay. And that's all I have. I'm pretty proud of a lot of that work. That work is done by a pretty small team, and I'm really happy with where Blockly has been and where Blockly is going. I hope these things are useful to you, and we have time for questions now. Someone somewhere has a mic.
Sure. You have all the mics.
Infinite power. Only I can talk. Did you?
I just want to say thanks for all the work you guys are doing.
Yes. Thank you.
I've started using dynamic categories recently, actually, and they're awesome. Let me just say that. Can you have, and this is a very specific question, but can you have a dynamic category for just a top-level toolbox that hasn't actually got categories?
So that you could change what the actual toolbox categories are, for instance?
Yeah, so we have one workspace that just has a flat toolbox because it doesn't need categories.
Okay. So if you have a flyout only, and you want to be able to dynamically update that, pretty sure there's a bug out for this because it doesn't quite work because the way that we register that callback happens at the wrong time in the life cycle. I think there's also a pull request for about half of a solution. So if someone wants to find that pull request or find the bug and work on it, that'd be good. There is an update, or there's a refresh toolbox call, or maybe it's refresh flyout, that may be helpful for you here. So the answer is no, it doesn't work yet, but there's no reason that it shouldn't.
Cool.
No questions? No comments?
I have a question maybe you could ask other people. So I think I mentioned already to Andrew that I'm like 2 years behind on the Blockly releases. And I was wondering, is everyone else here like up to date, or are we just like so hopelessly behind? We also have a tiny team, so.
Okay, if you are more than 5 years behind on Blockly updates, raise your hand. We're starting back there and we're moving up. If you are more than 4 years behind, raise your hand. This is lovely. I'm so happy. If you're more than 3 years behind. 2 years ago is when we made a lot of major changes, and I think that's a change that a lot of people just weren't willing to deal with when they tried to upgrade and stop there. Raise your hand if you're 2 years behind.
Right.
Okay.
You're not alone.
Not alone?
No, you're not.
Yep. App Inventor. App Inventor has done a lot of customization. That's another place where we're really trying to take stuff that they've done and pull it back in. And if we get that right, they also have an easier time doing their upgrades. Raise your hand if you're about a year behind. Okay, got a couple there. And if you are up to date with the most recent Blockly, which was like 2 weeks ago. Okay, and some of you just don't have a version of Blockly, and that's cool too. I get it. Okay, so yeah, some people are behind on that. Not all of these changes are great for developers as they try to actually move forward. When we say that we keep backwards compatibility really strongly, that's really, really about the XML. And then we try not to deprecate parts of our API too badly. But I did a lot of code cleanup, moving it around, a lot of shuffling, and I know that that caused pain for some of you. I'm sorry, but it was worth it.
Sorry, not sorry. Sorry,
Yeah.
not sorry.
Yes.
I'm glad to see the 2-month release cadence. I'm not deeply involved in every messaging that comes out of the Blockly community, but I didn't know you had a release cadence. I didn't know where to get a release. Is there, because I just now with the GitHub, no releases. I looked at the Blockly developer page, nothing on releases. So how are you communicating these releases other than the announce list? And is that something that
our GitHub is set up so that when you go there, you default to getting our master branch. That's our release branch. All in progress work that we do goes into develop, and we move develop over to master every 2 months. We don't have how we're communicating this entirely Blockly and Blockly announce lists. That's really how we talk to our developers.
so you can tag?
Yep. One.
Yeah,
we have not previously tagged releases. This was partly influenced by Neil when we first started working with him. He believed that Blockly should be backwards compatible and therefore didn't need releases.
It always works.
Yep. It's something we've thought about but haven't had explicit requests for. So if that's an explicit request, we will consider it.
Yeah, I mean, we're still playing around with what our release process looks like. It's kind of been yo-yoing of whether add a lot of additional steps that we have to do to make sure that we get a good release out, and then it's like, wow, that takes three weeks to do, and we're left with 5 weeks to actually do anything. So we're figuring out what's most useful. Good to know that actually tagging releases on GitHub would be useful, and we'll keep that in mind. If we're hearing that more, we'll probably do that. Andrew?
So 2 points on this. One, as we work towards NPM compatibility, obviously we're going to have to get more consistent in our releasing. Towards that point, our package.json now actually has version numbers that we're maintaining. We don't publish our own NPM package right now, and I haven't checked to see if anyone else has who is republishing Blockly has started using our version numbering system. But that will be the version number to look at. Second of all, we have been keeping our release candidate branches live. So if you really need to go back and look at a particular release, our list of branches, you'll see a number of RC candidate branches labeled RC. So maybe those should be tags, but branches in Git parlance are almost identical.
The nice about tagging is I can coordinate in package or in NPM itself. I can just say, hey, I'm going to tag whatever, because then you don't have to go through the whole ceremony of NPM. You can still get a lot of value to NPM users.
So what Matt was saying here was that one of the benefits of tagging is that it can be a reference point into the Git repo. And I do agree with you. It does solve some of the overhead, and it also works towards allowing existing NPM projects to pull in our system with a particular reference number, since the Git sourcing dependency notation in package JSON does allow that tag. You can make a reference to it. So yeah, we'll make a point of that. And since we have those release candidate tags in the past, we can do that for, I think, the past 3 releases. Okay, cool. No problem.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're also using the GitHub support in package JSON, but you can point that at the branch name. In fact, we switched from develop to master once the field registry was merged in. So, I mean, that again, would love to see version tags, but it's still achievable if you're keeping branches. That should be interchangeable.
That sounds like 3 separate requests for that, so we'll definitely look into it.
I think I will write that on a list. We'll start keeping tabs.
It says tagging. Just put that on my laptop. Look at it tomorrow.
Kind of going off of the that you mentioned that you guys are not the maintainers of the npm package. I just had to like, how much do you guys, I guess, interact with the maintainer? Because the last time I was using npm, it was really frustrating because every time I would go to do like the dynamic toolboxes or any of the newer stuff, it would just say not found.
I have no idea who that is.
The dynamic categories.
No, I have no idea who the maintainer of
Oh, I see.
the npm package is. Like, we didn't. I just don't know.
Okay, I was just curious.
We're actually going to have a bit of time tomorrow to discuss kind of more broadly at some of the roundtable stuff, more broadly, like npm and other ways of, being up to date with how the world does packaging and stuff. So we'll have some time tomorrow to discuss that because we know that's a pain point.